Leave your child a $500,000 IRA, and the IRS can force the whole account out within 10 years of your death, and in some cases, force taxable withdrawals out of it every single year along the way, stacked right on top of the highest earning, highest taxed years of their working life. Not spread over a lifetime, not eased in slowly. 10 years, full stop. This used to work differently. Your child, your niece, your grandchild, whoever you named, used to be able to stretch that account out over their own life expectancy. Decades of small, manageable withdrawals. That option is gone for almost everyone who isn't your spouse. The rule that killed it is called the 10-year rule, and it came out of the Secure Act. Here's the part almost nobody explains correctly. Depending on exactly when you die, your heir may not even get to choose when those withdrawals happen inside that decade. The IRS can dictate the schedule. That's not a one-time inconvenience. That's a decade of your family's tax return getting rewritten every single year because of a decision you made or didn't make while you were alive. I am your guide to real-world retirement decisions. This rule comes straight from the Secure Act and the IRS's own final regulations, and in the next 15 minutes, what actually changed, the one date that decides whether your heir owes the IRS once or 9 times before the 10-year clock is even up, the real arithmetic old versus new, and what you can still control while you're alive. Here's the first split. In one sentence, die before your own required beginning date, and your heir may owe nothing in between, just the account emptied by December 31 of year 10. Die after it, and they owe the IRS something every single year along the way, on top of that same final deadline. One quick ask before the numbers start. If planning like this is useful to you, tap like and subscribe now, so the next one finds you. Now, Part 1. Part 1. How the Stretch IRA Disappeared. If you've been assuming your kids can do what used to be possible, stretch this account across their own lifetime the way it might have stretched across yours, that assumption is the single most expensive myth in retirement planning right now. Before 2020, a non-spouse who inherited a traditional IRA could do something advisors called the stretch. They would take required minimum distributions based on their own life expectancy, not the original owners. A 50-year-old heir might have 3 decades left on the IRS life expectancy tables. That meant the account kept compounding, mostly tax-deferred, for another 30-plus years, with only a small slice pulled out and taxed each year. This wasn't a rare workaround. It applied to inherited traditional IRAS, Roth IRAS, and most inherited 401k and 403b plans alike. A grandparent's retirement account could, in theory, keep growing tax-advantaged for a grandchild's entire working life, with the tax bill spread so thin it barely registered. The Secure Act ended that for almost everyone. Now, most non-spouse beneficiaries, your adult children, your siblings, a friend you named on the form, have exactly one rule. The entire account has to be emptied by December 31st of the 10th year after you die. Not stretched, not smoothed. Gone by year 10. There are exceptions, and they matter. A surviving spouse has special options that generally keep them outside this standard non-spouse rule entirely. The flexible choices that existed before are usually still available to them. A small group the IRS calls eligible designated beneficiaries also escapes the 10-year clock. Someone who is disabled or chronically ill under the IRS's definition, someone not more than 10 years younger than you, and a minor child of the original account owner, not a grandchild, not any other minor heir. That last one comes with a catch. A minor child gets to stretch only until the IRS's own age cutoff for that exception kicks in. Once that happens, the 10-year clock starts running for the first time. Everyone else, the adult son, the adult daughter, the grandchild already out of school, is on the clock the day you die. Part 2. The required beginning date. The hinge. Here's the part that surprises people, including some advisors who learned the old rules and never fully updated. The 10-year rule is not always the flexible version. Take it whenever you want, as long as it's gone by year 10. It depends on one date, your required beginning date. That's the point where the IRS says you were legally required to start taking your own required minimum distributions. Age 73 for the 1951 through 1959 birth years. Age 75 once your birth year reaches 1960 or beyond. That date isn't your birthday itself. It's April, one of the year after you reach that age. Miss that detail, and even the before or after math below can land on the wrong side of the line. So do not compare only the age you died. Compare the date you died with that April 1 deadline. If you die before that date, your heir gets the flexible version. They can let the account sit for 9 years and take the whole balance in year 10 if they want. No annual minimums required in between, just the hard deadline at the end. But if you die on or after your required beginning date, the rules tighten. Your heir doesn't just inherit a 10-year deadline. They inherit your own RMD obligation along with it. Under the current IRS rules, they now have to take a minimum distribution every single year inside that 10-year window, sized to their own life expectancy, on top of still emptying the account by year 10. Skip one of those annual withdrawals, and the same penalty that applies to a missed RMD applies to your heir. An excise tax on the shortfall, 25% under current law, reduced to 10% if it's corrected quickly. The IRS added this piece for a reason. Early guidance after the Secure Act left people assuming the 10-year rule was pure flexibility. Wait 9 years, then empty the account in one shot. Regulators closed that gap. If you were already required to be taking money out yourself, your heir doesn't get to pause the clock entirely. They inherit the obligation to keep taking something out every year, not just the final deadline. So the honest version is this. Whether your child gets 1 deadline or 10 depends entirely on whether you died before or after that April 1 required beginning date most families have never heard of. Picture 2 versions of the exact same $500,000 IRA. Version 1. You die at 70, before your required beginning date. Your child can leave the account alone for 9 years, let it grow, and empty it in year 10. 1 lump sum, 1 bracket-blowing year, but only one. Version 2. You die at 80, well after your required beginning date. Your child owes something every single year for 9 years, sized to their own life expectancy, and then whatever is left still has to come out in year 10. The 9 years of smaller withdrawals do not save them from the big year 10 problem. They just add 9 more years of stacked income on top of it. Part 3. The arithmetic, old rule versus new rule. Let's put real numbers on it. Say you leave a $500,000 traditional IRA to your 51-year-old child who's earning $145,000 a year, squarely the highest earning stretch of their career. Under the old stretch rule, that inheritance barely moved their tax return. Spread across a life expectancy schedule instead of 10 years, the required first-year withdrawal was a small slice layered quietly on top of their salary, not a number big enough to change their tax bracket. The rest kept compounding, tax-deferred, for another 3 decades. Under today's rule, that same $500,000 has to be gone in 10 years. Split it evenly, and your child is adding $50,000 of taxable income on top of their $145,000 salary every single year for a decade. That is not $50,000 taxed at their average rate. It is $50,000 stacked on top of everything else they earn, taxed at their highest marginal bracket, the one their salary alone doesn't even reach. And spreading it evenly is the disciplined version. The riskier version is doing nothing, letting the account ride, growing tax-deferred for 9 years, then being forced to empty whatever is left in year 10. If that $500,000 grows to, say, $650,000 by then, all of it lands on one tax return. In 1 year, potentially pushing part of it into the top bracket, the one the IRS taxes at 37%, which in 2026 starts north of $640,000 for a single filer. One badly timed decade, and the IRS collects more from that single IRA than your child would ever have paid on it under the old rule. And here's the trap inside the trap. Even when your heir is required to take annual distributions because you died on or after your required beginning date, that yearly minimum is usually far smaller than an even 1/10 split. Meeting only the legal minimum every year still lets most of the balance survive untouched until year 9, which means the same bracket-blowing lump sum can still hit in year 10. The annual requirement stops your heir from waiting the full decade to start. It does nothing to stop them from waiting to finish. Part 4. The one version that doesn't sting. There is one version of this account where the 10-year rule barely matters: the Roth IRA. Inherited Roth IRAs are still subject to the same 10-year clock for most non-spouse beneficiaries. The account still has to be emptied within 10 years, but the distributions themselves are not taxable income because the tax was already paid before the money ever went into the account. As long as the Roth has been open at least 5 years, true for almost every Roth by the time it gets inherited, your child can pull the entire balance out in year 1, year 5, or year 10, and it changes their tax bill by exactly $0. The 10-year rule becomes a formality instead of a financial event. Many heirs choose to let a Roth ride untouched until year 10, specifically because the growth stays tax-free the whole time, and there is no tax reason to touch it any sooner. This is exactly why the choice you make right now, traditional or Roth, is not really a decision about your own taxes anymore. It is a decision about whether your kids inherit a 10-year tax bill or a 10-year formality. Part 5. What you can still control while you're alive. You do not control what your heir does after you are gone. You do control the account they inherit, right now, while you are still the one making the decisions. The biggest lever is converting some of that traditional balance to a Roth during your own lifetime, in years when your own income is lower, early in retirement, before Social Security and your own RMDS stack up your tax return. Every dollar you convert and pay tax on now is a dollar your heir never has to fight the 10-year rule over. The second lever is the qualified charitable distribution, and it works in 2 stages. Starting the moment you turn 70 and a half, even before your RMDS officially begin, you can send money straight to a charity instead of your bank account, and it shrinks the account balance either way. Once your RMDS dues start, that same move also satisfies the RMD requirement itself without adding a single dollar to your taxable income. The third lever costs nothing and gets skipped constantly. Check who is actually named as your beneficiary. If your intention is for a disabled or chronically ill beneficiary, your own minor child, or an heir not more than 10 years younger than you to get the more flexible eligible designated beneficiary treatment, that has to be documented and correct on the account itself, not assumed from your will. Check it again after any major life event, a divorce, a remarriage, a death in the family, because beneficiary forms do not update themselves, and the form on file with the custodian overrides whatever your will says. A fourth option is worth a real conversation with a fiduciary, not just a video. Life insurance owned outside the retirement account can hand your heirs cash to cover the tax bill without touching the IRA's timeline at all. Whether it makes sense depends on your health, the premium cost, and how the policy is owned. None of that is a video-length decision. It solves a different problem, the cash flow crunch of a big tax year, rather than the 10-year rule itself, so treat it as a complement to the first 3 levers, not a replacement for them. None of these levers erase the 10-year rule. They decide how much of it your family actually ends up paying for. Here is the one sentence worth remembering more than any number in this video. The 10-year rule does not care how carefully you built this account. It only cares how carefully you hand it off. Know your own required beginning date before you assume anything about how flexible this account will be for the people you leave it to. This is not financial advice and not legal advice either. Run your own household's real numbers with a fiduciary before you make any decision based on any of it. If this shifted how you see what you're actually leaving behind, tap like, subscribe for the next breakdown, and drop the word clock in the comments if you want the follow-up on checking whether your beneficiary form still says what you think it says. Protecting what you built is the last decision that's still entirely yours to make. See you next time.